From blind elves that farm acid-spitting bugs to witch-bird hybrids that rip out living hearts. Starting with a very gross creature, Draugr Overlords. These aren't your average undead. Draugr Overlords are the boss-tier ancient Nords who got buried in tombs specifically to keep serving their dragon priest masters even after death. They're level 45, packing 1400 health, and they'll disarm you with a shout before you even process what's happening. The disturbing part isn't the combat, it's that these were real people who were killed by their dragon priest masters and reanimated for eternal servitude. The lore confirms when the priests died, their followers were killed, reanimated, and sealed into tombs, periodically awakening to transfer energy that sustains their undead state. Centuries pass, and they just keep existing in those dark barrows, waiting for someone to disturb their rest. When you open those coffins, you're not waking them up. They were never actually asleep. They've been lying there conscious, feeding on death energy for thousands of years. That's the part that hits different. You're killing something that chose undeath over peace, and you can't even ask them why. The gameplay translates this perfectly. Death Overlords burst from their coffins mid-dungeon like they've been anticipating your arrival. They use unrelenting force to ragdoll you across the room, then close distance with ebony weapons while you're still trying to stand. Community polls consistently rank them in horror lists, not because they're hard to kill, but because that coffin burst never stops being a jump scare. You know it's coming. Still works. But undead Nords who chose eternal servitude, that's just the warm-up, because what comes next takes that same concept and covers it in volcanic ash that refuses to let souls rest. Ash Spawn. Dragonborn DLC dropped these and immediately reminded everyone that Skyrim could do body horror without trying. Ash Spawn are humanoid figures made entirely of volcanic ash, birthed from Red Mountain's eruption 200 years before the game. They're remnants of Dunmer who died in the disaster, their souls trapped in ash and animated by rage. They show up in Solstheim's ashlands at levels 20 through 40, throwing firebolts while their bodies constantly shed particles. The visual is unsettling because they're not solid. You're fighting a person-shaped cloud of someone's cremated remains that refuse to disperse. Every time you hit one, ash explodes outward and you watch them briefly collapse before reforming. They don't bleed, they just crumble and rebuild. Here's where it gets worse. These things appear during Radiant quests, meaning the game will randomly spawn them near you for no narrative reason. You'll be walking through ash wastes, and suddenly 6 of them rise from the ground like the terrain itself decided you needed to suffer. The sound design sells it too. They don't scream or roar, they wheeze. It's this hollow, windblown noise that sounds exactly like air moving through empty space. Because that's what they are. Empty space wearing the memory of a body. The lore confirms they're mindless, just pure trauma given form, but players report feeling worse about killing these than actual hostile NPCs because you're essentially putting victims out of their misery. Bethesda coded suffering into enemy AI and called it content, but ash zombies are at least mindless. The next creature on this list isn't just aware, it's hunting you specifically because you wanted knowledge. And here's the question. What happens when forbidden information decides to hunt back? Seekers. Stay with Dragonborn DLC for a second because we need to talk about Hermaeus Mora's servants. Seekers are the Daedric entities that patrol Apocrypha, Mora's realm of forbidden knowledge. They're invisible tentacle monsters that materialize when you get close, and everything about their design screams Lovecraft. These things exist between levels 21 and 42, sporting 4 tentacles and a massive eyes where a head should be. But the real horror is what they do. Seekers drain your health, magicka, and stamina while attacking. Fighting one means watching your stamina and magicka pools shrink in real time as this creature literally siphons your capabilities. You're not just losing a fight, you're losing yourself. The environment makes it worse. Apocrypha is an endless library of black books and green slime, and Seekers blend into the tentacle-covered architecture until they're already on you. Bethesda programmed them to use invisibility as an ambush tactic, so you'll be reading a book pedestal and suddenly tentacles are wrapping around your screen. The game doesn't give you a fighting chance. It just punishes curiosity. Community reception is split. Half the player base calls them annoying. The other half admits they're genuinely unsettling because they represent knowledge as a predator. You came to Apocrypha seeking power, and Mora's answer is creatures that hunt scholars. It's not subtle. It's psychological warfare dressed as enemy design, and it works because you need to be in Apocrypha for the main Dragonborn questline. You can't avoid them. Invisible tentacles that drain your stats are terrifying, sure, but they're trapped in another dimension. The next creature doesn't need portals to reach you. It just waits for centuries, pretending to be architecture. And here's what makes it worse. You walked past dozens of them before the first one moved. Gargoyles. Dawnguard added these and immediately established that not all horror needs tragic backstory. Gargoyles are just living stone statues that waited for centuries in the soul cairn, and now they want to kill you. Simple, effective, terrifying. They range from level 13 to 43, appear as sentinels or brutes, and they don't move until you're close enough to trigger them. The game places them on pedestals and ledges throughout the soul cairn, looking like decorations until suddenly they're not. That first encounter breaks players because you spend 5 minutes thinking the environment is safe, then a statue you walked past just 10 seconds ago is suddenly flying at your face with claws extended. The absorption mechanic adds a layer of threat. Every hit from a gargoyle drains health and transfers it back to them. You're not just taking damage, you're actively healing your enemy by existing in melee range. Bethesda programmed a creature that punishes the core combat loop, forcing ranged builds or perfect dodging, and they're fast. Stone shouldn't move like that, but gargoyles close distance like they're weightless. Here's the kicker. The Soul Cairn is already oppressive. It's a grayscale nightmare dimension where souls are currency and the sky looks like static. Gargoyles fit the aesthetic so perfectly you almost don't blame them for attacking. They're environment until they're not. That's horror design 101. Make the threat indistinguishable from the setting until the reveal. But statues coming alive is child's play compared to what's next, because Bethesda didn't just want to scare you with monsters. They wanted to make you pity them while they tried to kill you. And that starts with environmental storytelling that hits harder than any jump scare. Living statues that absorb your health seem bad until you realize they're stuck in one dimension. What's waiting in Apocrypha isn't bound by the same rules. These things regenerate mid-fight, spit biology you shouldn't see, and guard every piece of knowledge Hermaeus Mora doesn't want you having. But here's the thing. If lurkers are just guards, why do they regenerate? Keep that question in mind, because the answer connects to something way darker about what Mora's actually protecting. Lurkers. Back to Apocrypha, because Hermaeus Mora doesn't do anything halfway. Lurkers are his heavy enforcers, and they're exactly what happens when you give a developer permission to make something Lovecraftian. Giant humanoid masses with tentacles sprouting from their heads, carrying massive clubs, regenerating health mid-fight. Levels 24 through 54, health pools from 818 to 1768. These are boss encounters disguised as regular enemies. The tentacle spit attack is what elevates them. Lurkers will stand at range and vomit a stream of appendages at you that track your movement, not a projectile. Actual tentacles that stretch across the arena and chase you until they connect. The game makes you watch biology you shouldn't be seeing, and it deals damage over time while pinning you in place. Bethesda animated body horror and coded it as a ranged attack. Fighting them in Apocrypha's pools is worse. They emerge from the sludge like the environment itself is attacking, and their regeneration means you need consistent DPS, or they'll just heal through your burst damage. Community guides all recommend fire magic because it's the only element that counters their health regen, but that means standing still and casting while tentacles track toward your face. The game forces you to commit to a fight you'd rather flee. Here's the thing though, lurkers are guarding something. They don't roam randomly. Every lurker in Apocrypha is stationed near a black book or a word of power. Mora doesn't deploy them as cannon fodder. He uses them as final warnings. The ones who get past them are the ones who earn knowledge. It's gatekeeping through trauma, and it's effective because players remember these fights years later. But Lovecraftian enforcers are still just servants. The next creatures on this list aren't working for anyone. They ruled Skyrim. For 4,000 years, they've been waiting in coffins, fully conscious, for the exact moment you'd open that door. And when they see you, they don't hesitate. The question is, what were they doing all that time in the dark? Dragon priests. Now we're into the true nightmare tier. Dragon priests are the Lich Kings of Skyrim, ancient Nordic mages who served dragons during the Merethic era and achieved immortality through sheer devotion. They're level 50, hit for 1490 health, and they float, not walk. Float, because walking is for mortals. The masks are the trademark. 8 named dragon priests guard their respective tombs, each wearing a unique mask that grants specific powers. Croesus boosts archery. Meroke regenerates magicka. Kanarik summons a spectral dragon priest to fight alongside you if you collect all 8 masks first. Bethesda turned loot into lore and made you work for it by surviving coffin ambushes in Draugr-infested dungeons. What makes them disturbing isn't the power level, it's the implication. These were the ruling class of ancient Skyrim, the ones who enslaved humanity under dragon tyranny. When the Dragon War ended and dragons were defeated, the priests entombed themselves with their Draugr servants, waiting for the prophecy of Alduin's return. They've been conscious in those coffins for 4,000 years, fully aware, just waiting. And when you open that coffin during a dungeon crawl, they don't hesitate. They immediately try to disintegrate you, because from their perspective, you just interrupted a millennia-long nap. The ash pile death animation drives it home. Kill a dragon priest, and they collapse into dust while their mask clatters to the floor. You're not looting a corpse. You're collecting the only physical thing that outlasted their body. Everything else about them was sustained by magic, and the second you break that spell, entropy catches up all at once. Bethesda animated 4,000 years of decomposition in 2 seconds. Community consensus ranks them as Skyrim's most iconic undead for a reason. They're not just boss fights, they're history trying to kill you, and the masks you take become permanent reminders that you ended something that refused to end naturally. Ancient leashes who waited millennia sound like peak horror, until you realize nature itself can be weaponized. The next, creature turns peaceful forests into ambush zones, and here's what breaks the pattern. It doesn't hunt alone. It summons everything around you to do the killing. But there's something else. Something the game never explains about why these nature spirits work with the next creature on this list. Spriggans. You wouldn't expect nature spirits to rank this high, but Spriggans are a masterclass in subverting expectations. They're wood elementals that look like walking trees, glowing with insect light, capable of turning invisible and ambushing you in forests. Levels 8 through 30, with matrons hitting harder and burnt variants throwing fire instead of poison. The disturbing part is what they do. Spriggans don't just attack. They summon local wildlife to fight for them, transforming peaceful deer and foxes into hostile combatants. You're not fighting one enemy. You're fighting the entire ecosystem, weaponized against you by something that shouldn't be sentient. The game code's nature is predatory, and Spriggans are the enforcers. Their poison spray ignores armor and stacks damage over time while they heal themselves mid-fight. Bethesda designed an enemy that punishes melee builds, rewards fire magic, and turns running away into a valid strategy because sometimes you just don't have the resources to counter self-healing poison damage. Community guides emphasize bringing fire-resist potions specifically for Spriggan encounters because they're that threatening. But here's the truly unsettling bit. Spriggans are often found with hagravens, implying some kind of alliance between nature spirits and witchbird hybrids. The game never explains why. It just shows you two types of horror working together, and you're supposed to figure it out while they're actively trying to kill you. That environmental storytelling hits harder than any lore book because you're living it. The glow effect sells the wrongness. Spriggans aren't bioluminescent like real organisms. They're full of insects, literal bugs crawling through their wooden bodies, creating light through sheer infestation. You're not fighting a tree. You're fighting a tree carcass animated by a swarm, and when you kill them, the glow fades, implying the bugs just disperse to find a new host. Bug-infested tree corpses are unsettling, but they're not human. What comes next used to be. These are women who traded their humanity through rituals the game barely shows you, and they lead armies while wheezing through half-bird lungs. But here's the real question. If becoming a hagraven means losing your humanity, why are they still intelligent enough to lead rebellions? That answer matters, because it changes everything about what's coming next. Hagravens. Speaking of witchbird hybrids, let's talk about what happens when humans make terrible deals. Hagravens are women who underwent dark rituals to transform into feathered monstrosities, trading humanity for magic power. They lead forsworn camps, create briar hearts, by ripping out living hearts and replacing them with vegetation, and wheeze when they breathe because their lungs are half-bird. Level 20, 471 health, casting Fireball and Frostbite while inflicting brain rot disease through claw attacks. They're slow but deadly at range, and the game places them as camp bosses specifically so you hear them before you see them. That wheezing breath carries across the environment like an audio warning that something's very wrong ahead. The transformation lore makes it worse. Hagravens aren't born. They're made through ritual that's only vaguely described in-game, but the Repentance quest shows you the aftermath, a woman mid-transformation, screaming as feathers erupt from her skin. Bethesda doesn't show the full process. They just give you enough to fill in the blanks, and your imagination does the rest. That's horror through implication, and it's more effective than any cutscene. What really lands is their role in Forsworn society. Hagravens are matriarchs, leaders, the ones who command respect through demonstrated power. They didn't lose their minds in the transformation. They kept their intelligence and used it to secure political control over a rebellion. You're fighting calculated evil wrapped in a body that violates every human instinct about what faces should look like. The claw loot drops make it personal. Kill a hagraven and you can harvest their claws for alchemy. The game lets you turn their body parts into ingredients, which means you're commodifying someone's ritual sacrifice. Bethesda coded that interaction intentionally, knowing players would feel weird about it, but do it anyway for the stats. That's psychological manipulation through game mechanics. Community debates rage about whether hagravens deserve sympathy. Half argue they're victims of forsworn desperation. The other half points out they literally rip out hearts and animate corpses, so maybe sympathy's misplaced. Both sides are right. That's the horror. These aren't monsters you can morally simplify. They're complicated, tragic, and actively trying to kill you. All at once, ritual transformations into bird witches are horrifying by choice. But the number 2 creature didn't choose anything. An entire race got tortured into devolution, and you're killing them in their own homes while knowing exactly what happened to them. But here's what the game hides. They're not as mindless as everyone thinks. Watch how they organize. Watch how they farm. Because if Falmer are still intelligent after centuries of torture, what does that say about the bugs they're breeding? Falmer. Now we're in the deep horror. Falmer are what happens when an entire race gets tortured into devolution over centuries. They used to be snow elves, the original inhabitants of Skyrim before Nords arrived. When humans drove them underground, they begged the Dwemer for shelter. The Dwemer agreed, then poisoned them blind, enslaved them, and twisted them into the hunched, pale, screeching things you fight in every Dwemer ruin. They range from basic skulkers at level 15 to warmongers at 48, all using poison weapons and hunting through sound because they have no eyes. Just empty sockets and ear-like growths that detect vibration. Bethesda designed an enemy that makes stealth gameplay feel morally complicated because you're exploiting their disability to kill them more easily. The tragedy is unavoidable. Falmer didn't choose this. They were genocided, corrupted, poisoned, and enslaved until they forgot what they were. The Dawnguard quest Touching the Sky introduces Knight Paladin Gelibor, one of the last uncorrupted snow elves, and he spells it out. His entire race became monsters because they trusted the wrong people. He's watching you kill his corrupted kin, and can't even blame you for it because they're too far gone to save. Fighting them feels wrong in a way other Skyrim enemies don't. They live in hives with Chaurus insects, farming bugs for chitin, existing in total darkness because they don't need light anymore. You're invading their homes and slaughtering them for loot, while knowing their entire existence is prolonged torture. The game doesn't let you save them. It just makes you their executioner and moves on. The sound design amplifies the discomfort. Falmer's screeching sounds like pain, not anger or hunger, just pain. Constant, unending pain that's been their default state for millennia. Community discussions consistently cite them as the most disturbing enemy conceptually, because the horror isn't what they do to you, it's what was done to them. You're fighting victims, and the game rewards you for it. But Falmer breed Chaurus intentionally. They've adapted to underground life so completely that they farm the insects that guard their tunnels. That domestication implies intelligence they shouldn't have, according to lore. Which brings us to a creature frequently topping community discussions on scariest enemies, but because of what it represents about Skyrim's horror philosophy. And once you understand why Chaurus work as nightmare fuel, you'll realize Bethesda was never trying to scare you with monsters. They were testing how much discomfort you'd tolerate for loot, Chaurus. And speaking of those insects, here's the nightmare frequently mentioned in community discussions. Chaurus are giant bugs bred by Falmer as livestock, guard animals, and ecological partners. They're earwig-inspired arthropods the size of bears, with scything claws, glowing eyes, and acid spit that continues dealing damage after they're dead. Levels range from 12 to 32, depending on variant, with hunters hovering and reapers specializing in melee. The clicking is what breaks people. Chaurus announce their presence through rapid chittering that echoes in cave systems, getting louder as you approach their nest. The audio design makes your skin crawl before you even see them, because human brains are hardwired to hate insect sounds at that volume and frequency. Bethesda weaponized entomophobia and scattered it across every Dwemer ruin in the game. Their appearance doesn't help. Segmented bodies, too many legs, mandibles that click when they attack, and those glowing eyes that track you in the dark. Their textbook nightmare fuel, but the lore makes it worse. Chaurus are domesticated. Falmer breed them intentionally, harvest their chitin for armor, and use them as tunnel guards. The ones you fight aren't wild animals. They're attack dogs. You're killing someone's livestock, and they're killing you because that's what they were raised to do. The Frostflow Lighthouse quest is where Chaurus horror peaks. You find a family's home infested, their bodies cocooned in tunnels, and notes detailing how they discovered the Chaurus nest too late. The father's last journal entry describes hearing clicking under the floorboards while his family slept above. Bethesda took a simple dungeon clear and turned it into a horror story about home invasion by insects. Players report that quest sticking with them years later because it personalizes the threat. These bugs don't just kill adventurers, they slaughter families. Combat against them is panic-inducing. Chaurus spit acid that ignores armor, they're tanky enough to absorb massive damage, and they often attack in packs. The game forces you into tight cave systems where their superior numbers matter, and their wall climbing ability means they can approach from any angle. You can't bottleneck them, you can't predict them. You just have to fight and hope your DPS is high enough before the acid melts your health bar. But here's what really cements them as number one: the cocoons. Chaurus lay eggs that hatch mid-fight if you don't destroy them fast enough. Fledglings burst out and immediately join the battle while you're still dealing with adults. Bethesda programmed reinforcements that spawn from the environment, turning every Chaurus fight into a race against exponential threat multiplication. Kill the adults, destroy the eggs, loot the chitin, get out before more hatch. That's not gameplay, that's pest control under combat conditions. Community discussions on Reddit frequently cite Falmer and Chaurus among the scariest enemies. Not because they're the hardest to kill, because they're bugs, giant, acid-spitting, pack-hunting, domesticated bugs that click in the dark and exist in every underground space you need to explore for quest completion. You can't avoid them. You just have to accept that Skyrim's horror isn't optional. And that's the real answer to why these 10 creatures work. Bethesda didn't just make monsters, they made discomfort mandatory. Every dungeon, every cave, every ruin has something waiting that makes you question if the loot is worth the psychological damage. Dragons are a spectacle. These things are sustained dread. They're why you remember Skyrim's darkness more than its heroism. If you enjoyed this video and want to see Skyrim's biggest Mysteries Explained, click the video on the screen.